just wait for a few minutes.
Oh, we have Lorraine here. Hi, Lorraine.
Okay.
Hi.
This is getting confusing now.
Sorry, Lorraine.
Imagine how I feel. I'm no techie, I tell you. Okay.
Okay. Go back to Zoom, and we need to prepare our slides as well, because we are about to start.
I can't hear, Marcia. You need to.
So we need to switch back to Zoom, and then you can start. You can start.
No, we've got a few minutes to go, so I don't want to start early because it will, for people who are coming on at the start time, it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be fair. So let's just say.
Okay.
Hi to everybody. Hi, Dion. Hi, Maya.
Hi, Dion.
Yeah, last time, Maya. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Maya.
Hi.
How's Palmerston?
It's good. We can't keep up with the weather. That's the only downside. It's like 4 seasons in one day. But other than that,
great.
That's New Zealand, isn't it? That's New Zealand.
Pretty much. That's spring for you, though, isn't it?
It's better than always winter.
Exactly, that is true. I must admit, I'm enjoying the sunshine when it's here.
Yeah, it's bliss. Really good. Yeah.
Hi, Dion. How was your day?
Hi, it was good, thank you. Hi, Maya. Hi, Angela. Hi, Marcia.
Hi, Dion.
Hi. It was good, nice and warm.
Yeah.
Where are you, Dion?
Sorry.
Where are you?
In Palmerston North.
Palmerston.
Oh, both in Palmerston. Oh, yeah.
Both our lovely educators.
I've been in Palmerston North today. It was lovely. So nice. Yeah. You were on last time, Lorraine. Dion, weren't you, I think?
No.
I just know your name because, I probably just know your name.
Yeah, no, I couldn't make the last one, but I thought, I can do this one. At a push, I just got home, so.
Good on you. Thanks for joining.
That's all right. Running water?
I can hear running water too.
Someone's taken us to the toilet.
Funny thought. So maybe, Marcia, as we go through, you could mute people if there's background noise, just if we need to. Doesn't matter so much now. Oh, I can see a Christmas tree.
Yes, this is my lovely Christmas tree.
Oh my goodness.
Did you put that up today?
No, I put it up last weekend, the weekend just been.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm a Christmas person though.
Crazy.
Yeah, me too.
The children love it. They think it's amazing.
I bet. Yeah.
Big kid heart, obviously.
Second tree I've seen this week.
Are yours up, Marcia?
No, not yet. No. So next weekend, my plan is to get everything out of the garage.
Okay, so we've got 2 more minutes to go. I just want to be respectful of everybody who's planning to come at 7:30. So we'll just wait a couple of minutes. I hope you're all okay with that, guys. Hey, Mel. Hi.
Hi, JD.
Hi.
Just put my kids to bed, so hopefully they stay up.
I see you. Hi. I said hi, Mel, because I thought it was Mel coming in. Oh, it is Mel. Yeah, and Jit.
We might both be here at the same
Yeah,
time.
you're both here. Hi.
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 All right, well, we're almost ready to start.
Hi, Lorraine.
Oh, get comfortable.
Right, well, I think it must be just coming on to past now. Is that correct? Can we start?
Yeah.
Oh, still. All right, well, hi, everybody, and welcome to our second in our series of webinars. It's great to have you here. This series of webinars, I'm Angie from Education Angels. And this series of webinars is all about the future skills. And what we're looking at during this series of webinars is how a play-based curriculum supports the necessary skills for the future for children. So we talked about the necessary skills for the future in the last webinar. So if you missed that, we do have the recording, so you can go back and watch it if you're interested. However, we'll get started on this week's for now. So can you see my screen? Can you see my screen? Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Okay, yeah. Thank you. Cool. Here we go then. So as I said, we're Education Angels, a home-based education provider with services across the whole of New Zealand. We've got some amazing educators, and some of them are on this webinar now, which is really great to see. And some of our visiting teachers too. So what we're talking about today is how a play-based curriculum supports social and emotional intelligence. And during this webinar, we'll be talking about how to support your child to self-regulate, why emotional intelligence is important, and how emotions can affect learning and the development of the personality and the individual learning styles, which are all affected by and driven by our emotions. As we go through this webinar, I encourage, if anybody has any questions, I might not be able to answer them straight away, but just post your questions or comments in chat, and then I'll get to them when I can. Marcia, if I don't, then you can prompt me to respond to any questions. So I'll put the chat in front. Okay. So let's first of all look at why emotional intelligence is important. So, oh, sorry, my computer's having a bit of a jump. So as we talked about in the last webinar, emotional intelligence is linked to the skills for the future. So if we look specifically at the skills for the future, we can see that they include compassion and character, communication skills, collaboration skills, and motivation, as well as other skills such as creativity, critical thinking, and seeing ourselves as global citizens. So developing these skills in our children is really important to support them not only to get a job, but also to create their own jobs, because as we shared in the last webinar, the future of the work we cannot predict. It's going to be so different to anything that's ever gone before, and it's changing at such a fast pace that we're preparing our skills for a future that we have no idea of what it will look like or how to navigate that. So if we can prepare our children with the necessary skills for the future, we're preparing them, like I say here, not only to get a job, but to create their own jobs, because the skills for the future are also the dispositions and mindset and skills of an entrepreneur. And if we look at, if for those who want a professional, want to get a job, employers are looking for people with high IQ more than they're looking for people with high EQ, sorry, more than they are with IQ. So IQ is a measure of intelligence, traditional intelligence, the ability to memorize and problem solve, and emotional intelligence is the ability to understand our emotions and those of other people around us. So why are employers looking for people with EQ? And that's because they tend to be reliable. People who are high in emotional intelligence, being aware of, tend to be aware of the effect of their actions on other people, because they tend to understand that, understand other people better, the whole relationship thing, understanding emotions and the impact of their actions on others. So therefore, they tend to have a strong sense of motivation, reliability and responsibility. They also make great team players because they have developed that understanding of other people. They tend to work well within a team. Even if they're introverted, it's nothing to do with being introverted or extroverted. It's more to do with developing those skills, and they can be learned. Yeah, we're born with empathy, but we still have to teach emotional intelligence through emotional literacy, etc. And we'll talk about that a bit later. People with high emotional intelligence tend to be good listeners and good communicators, and as such then can be really good leaders. So, even for the world of work, we need to develop these skills in our young people. So what is emotional intelligence? And if you want to have a shot at answering that question, feel free to put them in the chat. Can anybody explain? I mean, I've talked a little bit about it. Does anyone want to come up with an answer? Anyone brave enough to speak up or type up? Or shall I just share? Okay, so emotional intelligence is being self-aware. It's understanding your own emotions, understanding how you feel and how you should respond or react in certain situations. So it's that ability to think about your own actions and your own behaviors and understand how appropriate they are or are not. The ability to self-reflect, to know yourself. Also, through that self-awareness, the ability to self-regulate, to be able to manage your own emotions. And I know plenty of adults who struggle with managing their own emotions. And I know that most adults at some time in their life also struggle. So it's a very human thing to do, to have a strong emotional reaction to some circumstances. So to be able to self-regulate is a really, really important skill that we need to teach our children. And to self-regulate, it does mean that understanding and regulating our emotions. So not, understanding that just because you feel angry at somebody, that you have to actually temper that anger and you can't just lash out at them. And the same with extreme excitement as well. We might feel like jumping up and down with excitement because we've just put our Christmas tree up, hey Maya. But sometimes there has to be an element of self-control. So it's not always negative. Yeah. And again, emotional intelligence is being able to motivate yourself. So not needing that whole carrot and stick, rewards and punishment, to be self-motivated, to do the right thing, to be intrinsically motivated, and to have empathy. So it's really important that we develop the skill of empathy in our children, because that supports very much with social skills as well. And I'm sure everybody knows that young children often struggle with social skills, and it's something we need to intentionally teach as well as role model. Marcia, can you please just mute there's some background noise? And emotional intelligence is essential for our own well-being and happiness. So it's not just something that's important for learning. It's something that can develop the skills and dispositions and ways of being in the world that can support our lifelong ability to form relationships and have good social skills, interacting with other people, and therefore having a much happier life. So we're not just talking here about achievement, we're talking about our, the holistic approach to our own well-being. and the well-being of our children. So let's look at what it looks like when our emotions are really strong and things are not going so well and we lose control. A common word for this is amygdala hijack. So the amygdala is situated, as you can see on this image here, right at the center of our brain. And it's one of the first parts of our brain to be developed, both as we develop in the womb, but also as we've evolved and grown over hundreds of years. So the amygdala is responsible for emotional responses. It used to be believed it was responsible for just the fear response, but they know now that that's no longer true. It's responsible for many emotions. However, when we're in a fear response, there tends to be an extreme response that's triggered by the amygdala. And that response is to release stress hormones into our body, adrenaline and cortisol, which then effectively cuts off our higher order thinking. So it stops us being able to process logically and puts us into a state of fight or flight or freeze. And the reason it does that, it's been evolved over you know, as humans have evolved, this ability has evolved within us to protect us. At one time, we might have been in danger of being attacked by tigers or chased by wolves. So it was not worth us standing around and logically thinking about how we should respond to protect us. Our biology has created the response of the amygdala to actually shut down that higher order thinking. So we don't stop and think about it twice, we just run. But that for some people, it's the fight or flight, and for some people it's freeze. But it's still a protective response. So, and it's biological, and there's not much we can do about it. Once we're in that state, the hormones are running through our body, and all we can do is just manage that situation as best we can. So everyday stressors can trigger the fight or flight response. Our brain can't tell the difference between a perceived response or a perceived threat, or a real life threat. So sometimes when we live with, and our children particularly living in really stressful environments, this fight or flight or freeze response can be triggered, even though they're not under any physical danger at all. But they could be in a very stressed situation due to, well, it could be many things, and I'm sure you can think of many as well. It could be due to parents arguing or something that they perceive as a threat to them emotionally. Okay, cool. I'm just saying hi to Ina. There's a comment here on chat. Welcome. I believe you're on Facebook listening in. And so when we look at the fight or flight response, again, once we're in that situation, it's very, very hard to get ourselves out of it because we've got all these hormones rushing through our body, and we cannot logically think about what we're going to do next or what's going to happen or how we might respond or how we might calm ourselves down. We just need to give ourselves or the child space and time for their body to calm down. There are things we can do to support that, but we cannot just switch it off by saying, don't be silly, or stop that, or come here, or whatever other responses you might have to what's happening for that child. We'll talk about some examples soon as well. So chronic stress in children can affect their ability to learn. And if you think about it, when we've just looked at the amygdala and how that responds to stress, then you can see that the higher order thinking brain, the frontal cortex, has been closed down by these hormones rushing through our body. So therefore, it doesn't matter how much you talk to somebody who's in that fight or flight response, they're not going to take it in, they're not going to be able to process. So the best thing to do, as I said, is allow them to calm down and those hormones to settle, and then you'll be able to talk to them. Yeah. And you can see, yeah, exactly. Lorraine's commenting here that you can see this often in children's play when one child might take another child, a toy off another child, or invade their space. And absolutely, and we'll talk about that a bit more, Lorraine, but very good example. So you can see that if children are in a stressful environment for sustained periods of time, then it can be very, very damaging to them, and it can have lifelong detrimental effects. So, and that's because during early childhood, 90% of our brain, it's about 80 to 90%, it's believed, is developed by the age of 5. This is why we have the most important job in the world, looking after our children. Does anyone have any questions or comments around what I've covered so far? Lorraine's just given a great example of how that can happen. And another example, Lorraine, is that sometimes when you go, I don't know, shopping with children, and they see all these wonderful glittery toys or inviting cars and trucks that they want to play with or want to take home. And it can be really, really challenging for children to understand that they can't have them in that moment in time. And then what happens then is that becomes a stressful situation. The amygdala takes over, and that's how you end up with a child thrown kicking and screaming and thrown a tantrum on the floor in the middle of the shopping centre. And I know many parents have been in that situation. I know I certainly have. And that's not because children are being naughty. That's literally a biological response in their body. So what we need to do is give them the skills to prevent it getting that far by giving them the communication skills to be able to effectively communicate their needs, but they're developing their understanding and resilience and other dispositions that help prevent that from happening. Cool. So let's talk about how we do prevent that from happening whilst we're on that subject. So first of all, we look at setting the right foundations for learning. And that helps if we can set the right foundations and I'm talking about specifically to developing emotional intelligence, but it's a general thing anyway, because the emotional well-being of children is an absolute high priority and just as important as their physical well-being and safety. So let's look at how we grow our children's emotional intelligence. And here's a quote directly from T. Fariki, the New Zealand curriculum for early childhood, is that children learn through responsive and reciprocal relationships with people, places, and things. And this is a really interesting quote, because very often we say, yeah, of course they learn well in responsive reciprocal relationships with people, but often it's not considered about the places and things around them too. How to respect the environment, or how the environment supports emotional intelligence. And we're not necessarily going to talk about that in much detail today. That can be for a future webinar. But just to know that it's really, really important that the emotional environment is protecting our children and creating a safe space. And it all starts with relationships. And that's why when we have children going to our educators are very aware of this and spend a lot of time working with the families and the children, having a smooth child-paced transition process, so that the child builds the relationship with the educator before they're left by their parents in the care of that educator, because that's so important. Yeah, and the well-being of each child is interdependent with the well-being of their teachers, parents, and family. And that is because we are all naturally wired as social animals, and we all have empathy, and we all use all of our senses. And so and think about this for yourselves as well. If you ever walked into a room, maybe if you're visiting someone and they've just had an argument, and there's that common quote, you can cut the air with a knife, or there was a really bad atmosphere. Those people are no longer arguing, but it doesn't feel good when you walk into that space, because you can sense that there's something wrong. And that can be challenging for adults to deal with. But imagine if you're a child and you don't understand that adults sometimes argue, and that actually it's all going to be okay, because you've had this experience many times where you've had disagreements with people, and you know that you're going to work it out and all's going to be fine. But if you're a child and you don't have that experience, that wisdom and that understanding, then walking into that atmosphere can be really, really unsettling, and it can really challenge a child's emotional well-being. So this is such a great quote from Tifa Riki, because the child is interdependent on that relationship and the teacher's well-being, the parents or their family, because they can sense a lot more and understand a lot more often than they can communicate. So it's about, when you're looking after children as well, just look after yourself too. Make sure that you're in a good space and that you leave any problems behind. You know, close the door on your problems and get yourself into the right headspace, into the right zone when you're caring for children. And that doesn't mean you've always got to be really happy and upbeat. It doesn't mean that at all. But it's making sure that you're in an emotional state yourself where you're feeling resilient and that you can cope with any situation that might arise whilst you're with the child. And forming those relationships with parents as well is a great way to help the child to understand that actually, you know, if the child sees that the parent trusts you as their caregiver, then the child is more likely to trust you as well. So another way of supporting children's emotional intelligence is having predictable routines and rituals, because predictability gives the child a sense of comfort and control, so that they're not just being plucked from one situation to another and not know what's going to come next. That can be very unsettling. So for some children more than others, but for most children that can be really unsettling. So even if you're a parent, whether you're a parent or a teacher, it's really important to have a rhythm to the day. Nature has its rhythm. The seasons have their rhythm. We have day and night. It's all a natural cycle and a natural rhythm that our bodies and our biology responds to. Well, just think about that as well throughout the day when you're planning your day with children, and have a natural flow of rhythms and rituals. And it doesn't mean that you have to do every single thing at the same time every day, but make the environment as predictable as you can. So another way is having consistent rules and boundaries. And if we can have this consistency and these rhythms and rituals, it supports children to regulate unsettling feelings, because imposing change on children and not giving them chance or the opportunity to prepare or predict what's coming next can be very, very unsettling. And that's where children will communicate through their behavior. So if you're in an environment where it's not predictable and children don't feel safe, then they're going to communicate that to you through their behavior. And you will see what you would consider challenging behavior from them children. So the more predictable your day can be, the better. And if it can't be predictable, remember to talk to children, even if they don't have the language or you think they don't understand everything that you're saying. Remember to talk to them and to tell them what's coming next, so they've got time to prepare. And this is, I was just talking about the behavioral expectations. Yep. So if children have consistent expectations, they'll begin to understand with a growing competency what's expected of them. If you're inconsistent, then what will happen is the children will be consistent. They'll just be consistently testing the boundaries. And that's always ugly. Because what they do then is that what you'll see is really challenging behavior, because they are unsure where the boundaries lie. So the only way they can find out is by testing you to see how far they can push you before you implement or put some boundary or restriction in place. Does anybody experience that? I bet most of you, if you've got children in your care, have experienced that this week, if not today, to some degree or other. Feel free to comment in the chat. And that also applies to regular routines, giving them a sense of security. That's absolutely right, Lorraine. And Maya, that's funny, saying daily. That's right. Very funny. So the other thing we need to consider too is ourselves as role models. So it's really, really important that we're a good role model for children. And in that, it has to be role modeling empathy and compassion. And being a good role model is being responsive to children's needs. If you want them to respond to your requests and your desires, then you need to model that first. So being responsive to their needs. To be respectful of how they feel. Even if you don't understand why they feel the way they do, and you might feel, you know, you're older and wiser and you've had much more life experience, you might feel that those feelings are an overreaction, or the child is being unreasonable, or all these judgments we might make about a child's emotional responses. I mean, and you know, in the light of wisdom and experience, you might not be wrong. However, for that child, that emotion and that experience is very, very real. And they're still learning about themselves, and they're still learning about the world around them. So it's really, really important that we take any emotional response or reaction very, very seriously and respect where they're at. And it's just a case of acknowledging how they're feeling. And Maya says here, sometimes children's emotions seem completely over the top to us. It's so true, they do. And it's easy for us to say, having lived through those experiences, and that's absolutely right. And JD says, my daughter will push boundaries as far as she possibly can. And, you know, that's intelligence. So, you know, we need to look at some of these actions and behaviors in a different light and not see them as a bad behavior, just to recognize that they're a natural developmental stage. And, you know, it's quite smart to find more than one way to test your boundaries and see how they can manipulate situations to get their own way. But if you set consistent rules and they know what to expect, then you're going to get them on the right path. Yeah, JD saying, I remember learning about the different parts of the brain and how they work. Often children are like a puppy and can only deal with one emotion at a time, while older people / adults can be more like a computer and running more than one. Yeah, well, when you think about it, children experience emotions much more strongly than we do, because we've had the experience many, many times over. So we are able to say, I've had that experience before, it all worked out okay, this is all fine, I'm not going to pay much attention to that. Whereas for a child, they have this emotion coursing through their body. They don't even know how to communicate, very often don't know how to communicate what this emotion is. It feels really, really powerful. It's often unfamiliar to them as they're, you know, particularly very young children. And it can be very, very scary. So it's really important that we're always respectful of how they feel. Yeah. And also to support children to explain how they feel by developing their emotional literacy. So I know every one of you will be getting a pack from this webinar on how to teach that. So it's just a really simple tool, but you'll all be getting one of those emailed to you. But it's very, very important to name the emotion in order to tame the emotion. Now, if the child has completely lost it, you might not be trying to teach them about it in that very moment at that one time, but certainly to be teaching, have it as part of your curriculum, have it as part of your daily conversation, and recognize, talk about how they feel, how the friends feel, how other people feel, how the pets feel when you know they're maybe being a bit rough with the pets. So as often as you can, bring that emotional conversation into what you're teaching, and talk about your own feelings too. You know, if you're feeling sad and it's obvious to the child you're feeling sad, then it's not always the best thing to say that you're okay and there's nothing wrong, because what you're modeling there is that we don't talk about our emotions, or you're confusing the child, because the child can feel that you're sad, they know you're sad, and you're losing the opportunity to explain to them what that means. Or, you know, if the child catches you I don't know, swearing or dropping something on the floor or doing all these things that as adults maybe we shouldn't always do, but we're human too, then, you know, it's okay to explain to the child, look, I was feeling really frustrated there, and give them the language and the literacy around that so that they then can learn it in a safe space and then be able to communicate back to you when they're feeling that way. And that's a really effective way for them to deal with that emotion. Of course, there are other forms of communicating the same thing, and tantrums is one of them. So always be calm and considerate and respectful in your responses. And I talked about this a little bit before as well. A child who's out of control needs calm reassurance by someone who is in control. So it's the worst thing you can do is start to shout and tell a child off who's lost control, because A, they're not going to hear you, and B, you just don't get anywhere with it. So you might as well, the best way to calm a child down who's lost control is remain calm yourself. They'll pick up on that energy, and we'll talk about this again in a minute anyway, but it's really, really critically important that we don't lose control with them. And Carolina's talked about how to deal with tantrums. I think we'll do a whole webinar on behaviour guidance, which will include how to deal with tantrums, because it's such a big topic that I think it would be worth having that as a topic on itself. But we will talk about it a little bit tonight. Put in chat if you think that's something that would be useful for you. And Estella has said she's made emoji cards. That's brilliant. And that with 8 emotions, and asked children to explain how they feel. Yeah. Okay. And that's right. JD's saying here, a children's counsellor said to me, it's okay not to fix something for children. It's about them knowing they're heard. And that's absolutely it. In fact, we don't want to always fix things for children, because then they're losing the opportunity to have a sense of empowerment, to have a sense of autonomy, a sense of agency over what they do. So often it's better, or as good as, to allow them to talk about how they feel, acknowledge their feelings, as JD's saying here, and then give them the skills or the strategies to know what to do next. So I think we'll definitely do a behaviour guidance one soon, Marcia. I think there's been a few yes comments here. So coming up, guys. And of course, be aware of your tone and your body language as well. Because it's not worth saying to a child, I'm here for you and you're okay, or it's okay. You should never say you're okay if a child is clearly not okay. Then if you're saying that, but your tone is such that you're angry with them, they'll pick up on the tone before they pick up on the words. So it's really, really important that your tone and your body language are calm. So when children are experiencing strong emotions, and these can be tantrums, but like I say, that would be a separate topic on its own. When children are experiencing strong emotions, it can be really, really overwhelming for them. And they can become so overwhelmed that they can't actually calm themselves down on their own. Or it can take them a very, very long time, longer than most adults have patience to tolerate. So I'm just trying to work out how I can move this bar. Okay, so during an outburst, it's really important that we stay calm, that we talk in a soothing tone, offering support. I was talking about that before. Again, don't make judgments about how they feel, and don't say, oh, you're okay, stop crying, because that's not acknowledging how they feel. And it's surprising how often you'll hear that. You know, walk around the shopping centres and you'll hear that from a lot of people as you're going around. That it's really important that if they're communicating they're not okay through their emotions, then it's really important that you acknowledge that and you're with them. Yeah, you're not judging the emotion. If the child does not want physical contact, then stay close to them so that they know you're there. Never force physical contact on a child, because if they're in fight or flight, they might see your attempts at a hug as being restraint, and they're going to panic. And in that, they're going to be kicking and screaming and trying to push you away. So it's if the child wants physical contact, great, then draw them in, give them a big hug, and just hold them until they calm down, because those hormones are still, we want to give them hormones chance to leave their body. And if you can slow your breathing down, if you slow your breathing down, then the child, if you're hugging them, the child's breathing will naturally slow in rhythm with yours, and that will help to calm them a lot quicker. And it's not worth talking about what happened at this stage, just be there. If you try and talk about what happens, two things will happen. Is one, they'll start to get back into the emotion, because they'll be maybe, you know, if that whole tantrum or episode was triggered by their inability to communicate their needs, then you're putting them straight back in that place. So it's better to talk about what happened when we're out of the energy, out of the situation. And then we can talk about, you know, providing strategies and skills for them for next time. And then, so that's, I've just been talking a little bit about what happens once they've regained control. Once they've regained control, doesn't have to be immediately afterwards, but soon afterwards, talk about what happened and ask them how they felt. And in that conversation, support them to develop the emotional literacy. So, you know, maybe if they're saying, I felt this way, and you can't quite understand what they're trying to communicate, and you think it might be, frustration, or they were scared or whatever, then, you know, maybe give them the language that maybe you were frustrated, or maybe it was really upsetting when that happened, or you were frightened, or start to just give labels to these emotions, so that then they then are able to explain to you in the future. Yeah. And again, don't make judgments, and always offer comfort. It's very, very scary when they lose control, very scary. So they do need a lot of reassurance and comfort afterwards. JD says, another good way to teach breathing is to sniff the flower. Yes, sniff the flower, to sniff, breathe in through your nose and then out through your mouth is another good way. Yeah. And these things are really good to teach before the emotion happens. So you don't need to wait for an episode to be teaching this stuff. You can teach it during, I don't know, just quiet time. You can teach it if you're working with children during story time or during math times. It can be taught anytime, and it's better to be taught before there's an incident, and then you can refer back to what you were doing. So if a child already understands sniff the flower and blow out the candle, then as you're cuddling them, once they've had that episode, you can then remind them that that's a really good way to help to calm themselves down. So learning itself is an emotional journey. So not only does the learning environment affect children's emotions, but learning is an emotional journey too. So it's all about the emotions. And belly breaths, absolutely. Belly breaths, the same thing, Maya. And there's been some really interesting research by neuroscientist Jack Panskep, and he did some work on he was basically looking at the emotions in animals. And through his research, he was interested then in looking at what emotions animals and people shared. And what he learned was that there are seven human drivers that we share with animals, and one of them is lust. I mean, we all procreate, excuse me, play, fear, rage, care, panic, and seeking. Now, the interesting thing, another word for seeking is curiosity. And for anybody that's working with, knows children, has children, any teachers out there, we all know that children are born curious. We don't teach children that they need to go and learn something. We don't teach them to go and explore the environment. We don't teach them to explore our faces when we're feeding them or to reach out for objects. It's an innate driver. We're born with that ability and that internal driver. So curiosity is actually at the heart of all learning. And as Einstein says here, seeking and discovery is at the heart of entrepreneurship or the skills for the future, where the reward isn't in achieving the goal, the reward is the journey. And we talk about this a lot in early childhood. It's not about the outcome. You know, when you've set up that really great craft activity and you've got all these ideas about how great it's going to look based on your ideas of what good looks like, or what a Christmas tree looks like, for example. And then the child creates something that is absolutely wonderful, but indistinguishable from what you believe it should look like as an adult with your own beliefs or ideas of the world, and the child produces something totally different, often a lot more beautiful and more interesting, but totally different to what you expect. And this is the whole point. You know, the thing is, we need to always respect the journey of learning, always respect the effort, and always respect what the child produces, because actually it's not about what they turn out at the end. We're not producing factory workers here. We're producing artists. We're producing, or not producing, but you know what I mean. We're encouraging creativity. We're encouraging the learning dispositions like persistence, resilience, exploration, all those skills, all those attributes that help children to become learners. So it's absolutely, the reward is in the journey, and the journey is around curiosity and more. So here's an example of what a learning journey might look like. It's driven by curiosity. That'll become next. And, you know, some people argue about whether curiosity is an emotion or not. Well, it's loosely an emotion. And I think generally people consider it to be an emotion right now. But the instinct, and we talked about that being a natural human driver, the instinct of curiosity is curiosity. And the emotion attached to that is wonder. I wonder. So they're very, very closely related, enough to say, loosely speaking, that the curiosity is an emotion. And we've really got to be careful not to dull the spark of curiosity in our interactions, but more in our behaviours, because children learn more from what they experience than from what you tell them. So think about how you interact in and around children, with and around children, in the home, in the environment, in the school, in the early childhood setting. And think about whether you're dulling the spark of curiosity by your own interactions with them. So we must ensure we don't do that. And if we look at ways to kill curiosity and ways to spark curiosity, then we've got a few examples here that we'll quickly run through. So first of all, think teacher, not student. So it's really important that we are a leading learner, that we're not there, as JD said before, we're not there to give the answers. We're not there to solve problems for children. We're there to provide an emotionally and physically safe environment in which children can explore and follow their curiosity and lead their own learning. So be a leading learner yourself. Be open to learning, explore with them. Don't be serious. Learning is fun, so be playful. You know, early childhood is a play-based curriculum, so be playful with them and have fun. Don't complain. Don't be negative and complain about situations or the children, even worse, the children, or parents or other people around children, because children will take that on. Children will learn from that behavior, and it's not positive. So what we need to do is always be positive in the environment around children. Remember, when we are negative, we're creating that negative vibe, and that's not necessarily as an emotionally safe space for children to be around. And if you work in teams, think about that as well. It's really important we create a positive environment. And nobody wants to work in a negative environment, not even adults. Don't be impatient. Learning takes time. So be patient. Don't be ashamed of being wrong. This is a big thing. You know, we need to model to our children that it's okay to make mistakes, because we learn more from our mistakes than we do from our successes. So if we want children to learn and to be open to learning, then we need to celebrate mistakes. So it's okay if we're building a tower and it all falls down. You know, it's okay if a child spills their water all over the carpet. It's okay if a child spills their meal on the floor. You know, as parents, as teachers, we need to be saying, okay, how can I make this a yes environment? How can I make this an environment where children are going to make mistakes, because that's how they learn. So how do I ensure that I'm providing a space in which that's okay for that to happen? And that's where your rules and boundaries come in, and consistency too. Not paying attention kills curiosity. So pay attention. If a child's talking to you, stop and listen. And pay attention to what's happening, and also pay attention to what you're doing, that interaction with you and the child. And then also with young children, you know, there's that quote, don't bother a busy baby. Paying attention doesn't mean interfering with their learning. If children are happily engaged in play, leave them to it. You don't need to interfere, because they are actively learning when they're engaged. So the best thing is to just leave them to it. But there are times where they do need your attention. And there are times where there might be adult initiated or adult led experiences that children need support with. So when you are there with them, just be 100% there and model what it means to pay attention, and which is similar to not being disengaged. You know, really engage in the process of the activity, or really engage in the conversation. So don't assume you know the answer. You know, and this is a big mistake parents, teachers, and adults often make with children, particularly around emotional mistakes and behavioral mistakes. They assume that, you know, the child that's crying is the one that was the victim. It's not always the case. They assume that they know what happened because they saw part of the interaction, or many assumptions are made about what happens in childcare environments and with our children. And it's really important, as far as possible, that we don't make assumptions, that we lead with curiosity, and we ask questions, and we show empathy and understanding. And we shouldn't talk more than we listen. It should be listening more than we talk. So give your children in your care, give them a voice, and allow them to express in the best way they can how they're feeling, or what's happened, or why they're frustrated, etc. And there's that whole saying, isn't there, that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So, and again, linking back to being open to learning, a big mistake is to be afraid of making mistakes. We all make mistakes, and we always will. Or if we're learning, we always will. So be courageous and be open to learning. And it gets back to celebrating mistakes, as we were talking about before. And also consider the people you spend your time with, and consider the people that you're taking your children to or around and spending time with as well. You know, is it a positive environment, and are they open to learning? So if we want to be a real good role model as a lifelong learner, and to teach children how to learn and how to about themselves and the world around them, then we need to create an environment that does that holistically. So not just creating opportunities for the children to engage and learn, but looking at the whole environment, the other people around them, the physical environment, how we set the environment up, as well as the emotional environment as well. So when we talk about curiosity, this is the learning journey, and it's really, really interesting. Curiosity leads learning. However, there are many other emotions experienced during learning, and they're not all negative. You know, some of them are very positive emotions, and they're not all positive either. So think about, you know, one is achievement. That's a hugely positive emotion for many. Achievement, pleasure, you know, we all know what it feels like to be persisting through difficulty and then suddenly have a breakthrough and achieve the goal we want to achieve. Having fun, learning is fun, particularly when it's all going well. Relief, sometimes the emotion is just relief. We've been trying to do something for so long and finally we understand it, or finally we've managed to have that breakthrough. And from that, there's a great sense of satisfaction. And they're all very, very positive emotions, which can bring joy too. But then we also have the negative emotions. You know, sometimes it can be quite frightening taking on a new task or a new learning journey, the fear of failure. It can be stressful, particularly if we've got time constraints. Or if we feel we're never going to get there, and we can generate stress in how we think about our learning. It can be frustrating, we can get impatient, and there are many, we can become anxious. Sorry, I've just flicked on a slide, but I'd finish that anyway. So there are many positive and negative emotions experienced on that learning journey. But what leads the whole thing is that curiosity. So again, it's really important that we allow children to be curious, follow their own curiosity. And through that up and down experience of the emotional journey, then children are developing lifelong positive learning dispositions. And we talked about some of these before, you know, being resilient, persevering through difficulty, having the courage to try something new, and developing confidence as they have a sense of achievement, and many more, as we can see on that slide. Excuse me. So, and when we're talking about learning being an emotional journey, and I mentioned earlier that as we're learning more about ourselves and our developing personality. So children, our emotions are our guidance system for life, right? And it's through our emotions that we understand, that we learn to understand ourselves. If you think about it, we're all born uniquely, perfectly imperfect individuals. We're born with inborn talents and abilities. And anybody who has more than one child, or has a sister or a brother, you know that you were born in the same environment to the same parents, but you are absolutely totally different to your sibling. Or your son is different to your younger son, is totally different to your older son, for example. And that's because we are all born uniquely different. And so one size fits all of education really doesn't fit all children. So the most important thing is to be empathetic, to be understanding, and to listen and be guided by your emotions and the child's emotions too, and to help the child understand what their emotions are teaching them. And also, as we develop, all those experiences are wiring our brain. They're wiring our brain to believe that the world is a safe space or it's not a safe space, whether people are kind or people aren't kind, based on their experiences. They're forming beliefs about themselves and the world around them. And this is why emotional intelligence is really important, because all these beliefs are formed from the experience, but how they feel about the experience. So, and then when we look at the brain as well, and we understand that we all respond differently to different situations, but there's the added complexity that we all have different learning styles. Now, we all learn with all of our senses. So there's no one person that just learns visually, or no one person that just learns through speech. We all learn through all of these learning styles. But what we find is that for some of us, some learning styles are more dominant than others. And if we look at the brain here, you can see that I've mapped the learning styles to different parts of the brain. So the frontal lobe is where the visual cortex is. Then we've got the temporal lobe, which is where the senses, the sensory, the five senses. That all happens in the temporal lobe. Then you've got the left brain and the right brain. Now, we all know that nobody is all left-brained and nobody's all right-brained. And you can live with half a brain. You can live with just your right brain and it'll compensate by developing some of the left brain attributes. But broadly speaking, the left brain is more dominated by logic and the whole read-write process. Traditional schooling is typical left brain type of learning. And the right brain is more about collaboration and communication. It's more auditory and verbal. And then we've got kinesthetic, which is movement and touch and all the senses, and visual. So we must understand as well when we're working with children that we all use a combination of all of those areas of the brain, but for most of us, there'll be a dominant area. Some of us are more visual learners, some of us are more auditory learners, some of us more kinesthetic and some more logical. So as we're learning to understand the child and helping them to understand themselves, just notice how your children respond best. Some respond better to pictures. So that's where we were talking about before, about those cards that show the picture of the emotion. So, and other children can respond more to verbal auditory cues. And for some children, they need to move to learn. They need to be able to manipulate objects or to have a sensory experience whilst they're learning. And so this is a whole topic in itself, but I'm just raising awareness to the fact that this exists for all of us, the different learning styles. And so when we're considering the nurturing and education of all our uniquely, perfectly imperfect children and their different emotional needs, know that one size does not fit all. We have different styles of learning and we have different needs, desires, talents and attributes. And the only way we can learn what they are and we can teach them what they are is by following that guidance system, which is their emotions. So, and this is a really great quote, I think, and it's a quote from Aristotle, and that is, there is nothing more unequal than the equal treatment of unequal people. So it's a bit of a one to get your head around, but if we think that we're all uniquely, perfectly imperfect individuals, then it's really important that we're treated as uniquely, perfectly imperfect individuals and not compared to other children, and not comparing their developmental milestones or their achievements or their personalities. Everybody is different, and every experience is wiring our brain for positive or negative beliefs about ourselves or the world around us. So this is a hugely powerful time to be part of a child's life and to be part of that nurturing and education of our children. So we're all in a very privileged position, but most of all, trust the children, listen to what they tell you, respond to their needs, and you're not going to go wrong. And enjoy the process. So that's the end of our webinar of content, but we do have about 3 minutes. So if anyone's got any questions or would like to say anything, it'd be a great time to post them now. And I see that we've got some of our educators on the call. So have Janet joined us, Jael and Alsel and Ina. So I believe you joined us on Facebook. So welcome, happy to see you. I'm sorry, I know there's a chat message there. I hope I've read the names out rightly, but I can't see them all because I'm looking at my screen. But so great to have you here. If anyone has any questions, post them in chat. And if you don't, that's okay too. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next time, where we'll be talking about higher order thinking and developing critical thinking and problem solving skills through a play-based curriculum. So I hope I'm right with the time. That's on the 26th of November. Hey, Dion, very welcome. Thank you for joining us. Yeah. And very happy to, hi, thanks Maya. See you next time. And I'm happy to stop the live if I can work out how, and stay on if anybody wants to talk or have any questions. Thanks, Carolina. Great to see you. Can I just stop share? I don't know how to stop the live.